Wow. You did your research, Sam. I don't know how I can compare with after I've been bigged up like that. But anyway, this is a lightning talk, so I'm going to keep it short, and I'm supposed to be like the warm-up for the other speakers that are coming. So I'll do my best to make this fun and interesting. So the need for data security. People today are bombarded with alerts and things that they must do. So patch levels, CVE notifications, SIM warnings, SAST issues, compliance deficiencies, the list goes on and on and on. Why are we still chasing them? Chasing all of them? It's because we've always done so. There's a prioritization of these alerts, high, medium, low, but they're still usually treated exactly the same. A high is a high, we're going to get to it now. A medium, maybe someday. A low, we're never going to get to it. But it's the proverbial tail wagging the dog. The horse before the cart. No one should really care about these events. They're mostly around their priorities. And I think, one of the guys from your group, Dan Cuthbert, did an analysis on CVEs and the high CVEs and the number they end up getting fixed and the number that actually, end up being used for breaches. And it's a staggeringly low amount. So why are we chasing them? Why, whenever we get a high CVE, do we must go and patch it like right now? What are we doing? So if I look at this happens, all the time. We run around chasing, how many people are chasing around log4j vulnerabilities around their networks and around their software, like all the time. But again, no one really cares. It's not about the vulnerability of the host. It's about the data, as we see every week. There's these kind of things that happen in the tech news that I see all the time. I particularly like the one in the middle. Guardian staff forced to work out a former brewery after ransomware attack. I'm not sure that's such a bad thing, but anyway, for the staff. So anyway, this hasn't always been so. Why is that? Because as Willie Sutton says, that's where the money is. There's only really three things of value in a computer system. There's the compute, there's the network, and there's the data. There used to be money in all of these, in these things. Like when you get a foothold into a system, you could use their compute for bit mining, for spam. You could use the network for DDoS attacks and things like that. That's not necessarily the case anymore. There's a lot of mitigations for them things in place. And the prices for criminals to use them kind of things have dropped. So like, Bitcoin price has dropped. Why are you mining for it now? The price for a DDoS, if you've got lots and lots of thousands of servers, right? The price of that was dropped. So they go for where the money is. Get some good data, and there's money in them hills. Times have changed, but we haven't. We're still doing the same things, even as computing is going through one of the biggest changes that it's ever had, the move to the cloud. So I wondered why things are different now. Why haven't people pivoted towards data security and still doing the same things? There's a corollary between patch levels of servers and those of VMs or containers in the cloud. The same with firewalls and security groups, the same with ACLs and IAM. So I pondered, why is data security a bigger thing now than it used to be? So after time, I kind of realized it's because the systems of 10 years ago used to be very vertically integrated. There was a database, a middle tier server, and a front end, all neatly packaged. And there were lots of these. They were kind of stamped out across a corporate landscape, mostly independent. Their sphere of influences and operations and controls were contained. It was very rare for systems to be talking to each other. It was very rare to have systems that spread out, like across a network Data neatly resided in very well-known and localized places. There was little cross-sharing of data. And if it was shared, it was generally through some commonly controlled central databases or NAS systems that were provisioned and managed by IT. Oh, no, sorry, not that IT, different IT. They had the keys to the kingdom, and if deemed worthy enough, and they blessed you with some database somewhere or some extra storage, or maybe if you're really good, some extra or more capable or better servers. But that's not what today's systems look like. They're built up from lots of collaborating microservices and software, and they're spread across many, many places. Some of them that you may own, some of them you don't. So take a quick look at that diagram. It's not a particularly complex one. It's just one that I pulled off the web. I've seen much more ones that are more insane looking than that, and hell, I've architected them myself, unfortunately. But if you look closely at that, there's 7, counting 7 data stores in that diagram. And that's not including where logs could go to, that's not including source code repos, that's not including documentation, etc. All of these provisioned and available with a few clicks of a credit card. So what if there's another way? The red pill to escape the constructs where we're chasing CVEs and patch levels, etc. Or the blue pill where we carry on doing the same. But who am I kidding, though? We end up taking both pills. Somewhat like Neo being offered some MDMA in a rave and just snatching both of them, because that's the kind of people we are. Have you ever thought what would happen? Do you stay in the Matrix or do you get flushed out? And that kind of bugs me. It's like, what happens with a spinning top at the end of Inception? It's one of life's mysteries, and it bugs me at least. So, we're talking about data and having a data-centric approach to security. And I'm not talking about the crown jewels of data. We know where that is. It's locked up and it's guarded by people with funny hats. No, I'm talking about the rest of the data. The stuff that's out there that glues things together, that keeps our software turning, the log files, right? The data lakes, the documentation, the backups, that S3 storage system that Jack set up the other day that no one really knows why. It's because your data isn't where you think it is. It's not neatly in relational databases. It's not categorized. It's not backed up. It's dumped on the floor, unstructured, like a teenage boy's bedroom. At least until they want that T-shirt that Jacqueline down the road really likes. So, as an aside, you kind of have to excuse my friend down there at the front. He's a friendly guy. He's got a really contagious laugh, but he's got this big chrome dome and he just insists on sitting at the front of every single presentation. So I considered photoshopping him out, but life's too short and I really don't care that much. But anyway, say hi to Benjamin. Say hi to Benjamin. Come on. Hi, Benjamin. No, he's not taking that much attention, probably like you guys at the back. Anyway, we have to realize that our software and systems are like mini factories. They're taking in raw resources and producing a refined output, but while they're doing so, they're producing this digital exhaust. And most of that is benign, logs, configuration, and data files. But as benign as they are, it's those things that end up getting corporations hacked. Or at least on the cover of the tech news every other week. There's some data leak, there's some ransom intrusion, but just as much as we all kind of love these high sophistication vulnerabilities, the ones that are world-ending and don't nearly happen as often as we think they are, it's the boring basics, the things that we have to keep up with. It's like running into Bigfoot on your morning jog around Hyde Park. First is not looking as you cross the road, as you cross Park Lane back to your swanky apartment. One of these things is going to kill us one day, and I think we know which one. Maybe Bigfoot may be hiding behind this tree at Speaker's Corner. I don't know, maybe he has some strong views about, the policies of Sunday trading or something. But here's what I do know. There's AWS keys and secrets that are often found in GitHub repos. There's unreleased footage of 3D, and there's unreleased footage and 3D resources from A-title games on a public Slack channel. There's company-sensitive data stored externally with anyone with a link. And there's personal private information open in an Elasticsearch server. Emails detailing company contracts, preferred pricing, and some probably not exactly complimentary commentary about the said customers, all sitting in an Azure blob store. And our old favorite, an open S3 bucket with nothing less than millions of passport data. No. So what should we do? Well, the first thing is let's try to map out our data stores. So as Mr. Miyagi says, you can't fight if you can't see. I probably got that wrong. It was a bad guy, but whatever. And then what we do is we start annotating where them data stores with the different types of data and whereabouts it was found. Yes, it's a lot of work. There are tools out there to help this. No, I'm not going to pitch any on what their pros and cons are. I'm not doing that vendor thing up here. But with this info, when your SIM starts alerting, or your CSPM tools are starting to warn you that there's this public database that's out there, or this open bucket, or this is vulnerable system that is exposed to the internet, or your SaaS system says that that you must fix this dependency for this critical CVE, and then someone goes and reaches for that emergency button, you know if they're protecting, if the real thing that is at risk there is either cat gifts or credit card data. And that should dictate your response. Not whether it's a high CVE, not whether it's alert on your CSPM or something. What it is the actual data that people are going for, because that's the thing of value. The thing of value isn't the CVE, it's the data that someone is going to get to from that. So you can use that, and you can use that to proactively filter and target the scope of all of these tools that are constantly chirping to just what's meaningful. So come on, I've got to stop talking and get to the real speakers. The point is let's not get distracted by the new and shiny. SBOM is a thing. It's probably needed, but not if you're walking around with your data exposed. So, a quick takeaway. Something that you can do now. We have a fetish for data. We hoard it, but we don't use it as much. We don't really need it around. Most data just sits there like nuclear waste, gathering. We've used it for powering our plant, and then it just sits there. We've got to do something about it. Or maybe a better example is that cable that I've just used and I stuff away in that box because maybe I'm going to need it later, some other day. Come on, I'm not the only one that does that, right? You guys do that too. So data has a half-life until it becomes no longer useful. 10 years for a passport, 4 years for a credit card, 30 days for a log file, maybe seconds for an exception or a memory dump. Until that time, data's just not useful anymore. And keeping it longer isn't necessary, and it's just adding risk. We can't be golems, craving the precious. Data is evil. It corrupts, and it gets us into all kinds of problems. If we know where the vulnerable data is, how it's used, how it's useful, how it's protected, then we can manage it. That may be securing it, or it may be throwing it in Mount Doom to get rid of it. But we have to get them back to the Shire, and we can live good, happy, simple lives once we can manage the data that we've got, and we've got rid of the stuff that we don't need. It's not easy to do. But when I'm asked about data security and remediations, it's the most simple and straightforward one out there. Take out the trash. We end up becoming happy because it's less to manage. Our bosses are happy because it's less risk. Our accountants are happy because it costs less money. Jeff isn't happy because you aren't paying for them AWS storage that you're not going to use, but fuck that guy, he's got enough money. And that's it. I'm Mike Andrews, I'm the head of engineering at OpenRaven. You can get to me at these places, even at the bird site, well, it's still a thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mike. Amazing talk. We have one question which came in from Slido. The question is, should you also use vulnerability age to decide on fixed priority? And if so, how?
No. Who cares about the vulnerability age? The vulnerabilities can be sitting around forever, and if they're not taken advantage of, they're not being taken advantage of. I have a strong belief. Maybe it's the wrong one, but I think that it depends upon the data that it's protecting. The things that are sitting out there, the brand new ones, can get attacked straight away. The old ones can just be sitting there not being used. Chasing around CVEs, chasing around vulnerabilities, just purely for what their score is or what their age is, it's just going to be a game that we're just never going to keep up with. So looking at the data and saying, okay, this system has this vulnerability, what data has it got or what data does it have access to, should dictate whether I need to go and do something about that system.
Cool. I think there was one more question for him.
Didn't hear the question, sorry. Vulnerability data is still data that you have to protect. It can be. You have to be careful with it. If someone gets vulnerability data, it's like a footprint of where you have problems within your network. And so for sure, right? The vulnerability data is data itself, and you can say that that is valuable. But do you know where that vulnerability data is? I bet it's not just in that, the tool that you're using and its database. I bet as that tool is working, it's spewing log files all over the place. I bet that, as someone emails things around and got a report and drops it out somewhere, it's in them kind of places. It's not often the primary data that gets you hacked. It's the secondary data. It's the exhaust, the AWS key that's been left around that then someone goes and uses. And they're the things that's hard to find. And I think if there's one thing I want you to take away is to have a look around and see where that extra data is and how you can find it, what you can do to protect it, and then just know what's out there.
There's one more question. Sub.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you've talked about lots of different data all over the organisation. We do, and everyone does, and most of it we don't know. My question is, with all this data, do you have any suggestions on how you get about valuing it? Because not everything is the same value. We've got lots of assets. Data is just one of them. As security people, we need to understand and look at the risk, how we value what data we've got, what are real assets and what are just things that we can get rid of. And I know that you said we should be deleting data. We don't. But how do we delete the right data and not the wrong data?
That is such a difficult question to answer generically because it entirely depends upon the company, the organisation you're working with. Like one of the people that we've worked with, right? They end up asking us, to scan systems to go and find stuff that is a particular code word of a project because they don't want that released until when it needs to. That wouldn't exist in any other organisation looking for that data. But it's critical for them that they don't leak this project. As soon as a project is done, that's it. The same with financial data, right? The financial data of the data for the close of quarter has to be really protected well until it's released. After it's released, it becomes public information. The same with documentation. One of the things that I've found that is just a lot of people just ignore is the documentation of a product. The documentation of a product that should be internal for customers only or should be for pre-release ends up getting put into some bucket, or as I've seen loads of times, it's on a README.io site that you just need to know the URL and go and find it. It's really hard to say because it entirely depends upon your organisation. A lot of the time is talk to your CEO, talk to your head of engineering, and say, what data would you not want on the cover of the New York Times? That's what you go to first, and then work down from there.